welcome everyone to the OSCE, the online PG training program of Cochin Orthopedic Society. So, we'll be talking on the shoulder joint and injuries around the shoulder joint. So, let's start right away with the anatomy of the shoulder joint. So, I think I can see 14 people here. So the first question, so that's true and false. There will be an assessment at the end of the session. So I suppose it's a very interactive session. I've been here a few times. Towards the end, we'll recollect few. I'll ask some questions, so be attentive. So, yeah, can I have some answers, Dr. Anto?
Yes, sir.
Abduction of the shoulder joint requires, which all are true?
Active truths are intact axillary. That's true.
Yes, that is true, correct. What is false in this? Trapezius?
Active involvement of trapezius. That's false. Active involvement of
Trapezius are involved in overhead
intact period. That's false.
and deltoid.
Sir, there is some problem with the voice.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So active involvement of trapezius and serratus both are required for overhead movements. Axillary nerve supplies deltoid, which is again required for above 90 movements. What about C? Okay. Shall I give the answers? The C and D are wrong. Radial nerve is not required, and eighth cervical spinal nerve does not supply an active abductor of the shoulder joint. Okay. All right. So I put in a few questions, few tests, few X-rays, and some case scenarios. All right. So the next question in anatomy and biomechanics: teres major. What all are true? Yes, it forms part of the posterior wall of the axilla. B is right. Okay. Is an adductor of the glenohumeral joint. Teres major. Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Does it form part of the rotator cuff?
No. Teres minor.
Yes. And is it attached to the greater tuberosity of the humerus?
No.
A and E. It's applied with the posterior quadriceps press. That is right. Okay. All right. So you can ask questions in between. All right. All the participants feel free to break me at any time. So following structures are static stabilizers of the shoulder joint except
Subscapularis.
Okay. Is there
It's a
anything?
dynamic.
Yeah. You're right.
Supraspinatus.
Yeah, that is also a dynamic stabilizer. So the glenoid labrum is a static stabilizer, MGHL and IGHL, okay, are static stabilizers. Next, one more EMQ. The capsule is attached to the surgical neck, and the tendon of short biceps runs within the joint capsule. The joint is abducted by latissimus dorsi. That is wrong anyway. We know that. C is wrong. Dislocation of the shoulder joint most commonly occurs in the posterior direction. Is that right?
Yes. No.
No.
It's false. False.
Always anterior. 87% or 80% is anterior. The glenoid labrum is a rim of hyaline cartilage. Is it right? Glenoid labrum is made of fibrocartilage, not hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage lines the glenohumeral joint.
Mm-mm.
Right? And capsule, is it attached to the surgical neck? Dr. Jose? Is that the right statement in this? Anyone? Okay, I'll give the answer. That's wrong as well. So all the statements are wrong. It's attached to the anatomical neck of the humerus. Okay. Let's move forward. I can see some crying. Yeah. What test is this?
Kennedy test.
Yeah. You're right. Who was that?
Shinas.
Okay, good. So that is a Hawkins-Kennedy test. It's a test of impingement, right? So the shoulder is kept at 90-90 and internally rotated passively. All right, the patient should experience pain in the anterior aspect of the shoulder joint. So what are the other tests for shoulder impingement? The Neer's impingement test, which is again a passive forward flexion of the hand with internal rotation. And the MT-CAN test also will be positive in shoulder impingement, okay, which is done with the hand in the scapular plane. Okay, what test is that? Ignore my left hand.
Speed test.
The right hand again means the patient is applying a forward flexion force from the shoulder.
Biceps for biceps.
Yeah, you're right. For biceps. What test is it?
Speed test.
Correct, you're right. That's a speed test. What is the other test for biceps?
Ergson.
Huh?
Ergson.
Ergson's test, yes. So that is the speed test, resisted shoulder flexion with the wrist supinated and the elbow extended. That's a speed test. Huh? And that's the Ergson's test. That is with the elbow kept at 60 to 90 degrees and supination is resisted. Supination of the wrist or the forearm is resisted. The biceps is the supinator of the elbow. Again, another test. What test is that?
Cross arm.
Cross
arm.
Dugas test. Dugas.
Dugas.
cross adduction test.
Cross.
What is it testing? What is it testing? What are we testing?
Dislocation.
It's not the dislocation.
Osteoarthritis of AC joint.
Yeah. AC joint pain. You are testing clavicular joint. You're right. That's a cross adduction test. So how will you differentiate between shoulder impingement and AC joint arthritis? So most of the tests are overlapping. So in impingement, the Neer's test, as we saw, the Hawkins Kennedy and the MT-CAN can be positive, but you should always elicit tenderness over the acromioclavicular joint. That is an important test to differentiate from an AC joint arthritis. In an AC joint arthritis, all these tests can be positive, and this cross reduction, the patient will have problem with reaching over to the opposite side, especially when inside a car trying to pull the seat belt over or trying to hold something from the side, from the opposite side. The patient could have pain over the anterior or the anterior superior part of the shoulder joint, which is the acromioclavicular joint. So shoulder impingement, let's look at the types of impingement. It can be an external impingement or an internal impingement. What is internal impingement? External we always think about. External is on the outer side of the shoulder joint, on the acromial arch. We did all the tests. What is internal impingement? Where does it impinge?
Inside the shoulder.
Pardon? So internal impingement occurs inside the shoulder joint due to a repetitive movement in instability. So it will be between the posterior superior aspect of the glenoid or the glenoid labrum with the posterior aspect of the humeral head. That is internal impingement. That will elicit pain on the posterior aspect of the shoulder joint. This can be in full-fledged dislocations or partial tears or the rotator interval problems, like when there is a biceps pathology, the shoulder ball, the glenoid, the humeral head will be moving forwards, which can cause impingement and pain in the posterior aspect of the shoulder joint. Or it also can be seen in throwers. The posterior pain can be also in posterior impingement of the shoulder joint in throwing athletes. A case scenario, 20-year-old male comes with history of fall from two-wheeler. There is pain and swelling of the shoulder joint. What's your diagnosis on the X-ray? Come on. Do you see something abnormal? Is it clear? Is the picture clear?
Fracture wasted token.
Is there a fracture of the greater tuberosity? You said greater tuberosity, isn't it?
It needs to part.
Yeah, there is something going on there. You're right. This line is abnormal, and you can see two lines here. So, what do you want to see now?
Sourcil sign.
Yeah, you are right. Social sign is positive there, but there is something bigger in this which we are missing. What do you want me to show now? Do you want to see something more? What are the views of the shoulder you would take in a trauma situation? What are the X-rays? Advice for an AP view or a true AP view. What is the difference between AP and a true AP view?
The plate is held oblique.
Yeah, there is a chordate tilt of the chordate tilt of the beam, so that the acromion is normally a structure which comes from posterior to the superior aspect. So to see the subacromial space as well as the glenohumeral space, you have to direct the beam in a little chordate direction. Okay, that is a true AP view. So you can see both the joints. So you cannot see the glenohumeral joint. If it's a true AP view, you would say it is wrong. So the next X-ray you would want to see is an axillary view, isn't it? Okay, axillary view and probably a scapular Y view as well. These are the three views which can be taken without moving the shoulder much. Okay, shall I show you the axillary view? Do you see
Yes,
something in the axillary view? That's a fluoroscopy picture. You can see that is the greater tuberosity and that's the humeral head, and the glenoid is in between both. That is a fracture dislocation, a posterior fracture dislocation. Alright, so AP views can be misleading sometimes, so you have to carefully read both the views and advise for a cross table or a scapular Y view if you are suspecting a dislocation, almost like a inverted light bulb in a posterior dislocation, but this is a fracture dislocation of the humeral head. 80-year-old lady, trivial fall in the room. Diagnosis? Straightforward. Yes, it's a four-part fracture, isn't it? Yeah, it's straightforward. It's four-part fracture of the proximal humerus. So, what is your treatment? How would you treat it?
Or if
Yes, you can try ORIF. Yes.
Arthroplasty.
But you can see the head is split. I would like to see a CT scan always. I don't have a CT here. So if the CT says that this fragment is small, what would you have as a backup at least?
Arthroplasty.
Yes.
reverse shoulder arthroplasty.
All right. So there are surgeons. There are surgeons who are watching for reverse shoulder in these cases as well. But then, when you have a good rotator cuff attached to greater tuberosity and lesser tuberosity fragments, then you can always do a straightforward hemiarthroplasty. Shoulder is a little more forgiving than the hip joint in case of the other side wear. In the hip joint, we always say in a younger person, you have to replace the acetabulum as well. But in the shoulder, you do a hemiarthroplasty, the patients are quite happy, especially at this age. That's why I wrote 80-year-old. Okay, 80-year-old, you always think about a hemiarthroplasty. It's straightforward, economical, and a quick relief. A reverse shoulder is probably not going to give anything extra, or you are burning bridges by doing a reverse shoulder arthroplasty. I would do a hemiarthroplasty with reattachment of the tuberosity fragments. Any difference of opinion? Yes, so that's what was done for the patient. And whenever you do a hemiarthroplasty, you have to understand that the fragments are pulled by the muscles attached to them. So that is the humeral head, and the lesser tuberosity and the greater tuberosity are pulled outwards, posterior and anterior. And when you do a hemi, you have to take care of the retroversion, which should be between 20 and 40. Around 30-35 is the ideal retroversion of the humerus. And attachment of the tuberosities is very, very important. So every hemiarthroplasty implant or a replacement implant will have fins with holes there to attach the tuberosity fragments. So the tuberosities just need not be attached to themselves, it should be attached to the shaft fragment as well. And the biceps tendon can either be tenotomized and tenodesed with one of these sutures, which is usually degenerated at that age. So, or you can either conserve it as well. So, reattachment of the tuberosity fragments with sutures in this configuration is important in a hemiarthroplasty. That should always be there in your mind. So, I would always do a hemiarthroplasty in such a scenario, which I would say maybe is the 70% required, or maybe ORIF can be thought about, but might be difficult in a head split situation. Yeah. So another EMQ, the subacromial bursa normally lies between the joint and supraspinatus tendon. Is that a right statement?
Yes.
Yes, one person said yes. Does everyone agree to that? Dr. Anupam? Don't mind if I call names, huh? Just to make it interesting. And feel free to make mistakes. There is no one to judge. Not a right statement. Okay? It lies above the supraspinatus. The joint capsule is below the supraspinatus, and the subacromial bursa is above the supraspinatus and between the supraspinatus and the acromial arch. Glenoid labrum is intracapsular, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Right? And joint cavity normally communicates with the subacromial bursa. Right or wrong?
No.
No, it's wrong. You're right.
Wrong.
That's a wrong statement. Joint capsule is most lax in the superior aspect of the joint.
No.
No.
No, it is in the
Inferior.
inferior aspect. The superior aspect has tension. That is the crux of superior capsular reconstruction when you don't have a rotator cuff. The joint capsule has posterior relation to the subscapularis tendon.
Anterior.
Yes.
Right?
No.
It means that the joint capsule is behind.
No.
Yeah, it
No,
is.
no.
It is behind the subscapularis, isn't it? muscle lies outside the joint capsule. There is a
Oh.
capsule. Hmm?
Oh.
So that
yeah.
capsule continues
Yes, yes, sir.
to become sphenoid. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes,
the
okay.
true statement. Okay. Then another case scenario: a 42-year-old lady, pain and difficulty in overhead activities for 8 months. She's got full passive range of motion. Empty can and full can are full power, 5 by 5. Bear hug is 5 by 5. That is subscapularis. External rotation lag side is positive. And resisted external rotation is only 2 by 5. What is the diagnosis? So what is weak here? Which one of the rotator cuff muscles is weak? Empty.
Infraspinatus.
Infraspinatus. You're right. You're right. Infraspinatus is weak. And what is the other muscle you like to test in the rotator cuff? I've tested all the three. All three. One is not tested. Which one?
Teres minor.
Yes. How
That's
do you?
fine.
On blower.
Yeah.
On block.
Good. So it is an isolated infraspinatus weakness. So what are the reasons for all isolated infraspinatus weaknesses? What should strike your mind when you see this? Normally in an OP, you test the empty can and full can, and when the supraspinatus is okay, you are fine and you are happy with the rotator cuff, and you don't go forward sometimes because that is the first muscle which tears. But this is not a muscle tear. This is something else. What can it be?
Tendinopathy.
Okay, that's a long shot. There is something more common, not that common, but I've seen many in my life. I've operated many. I said I operated. There is an operative pathology here. And once you detect and correct it, the patient is very happy for the problem. It is often missed. Many patients run around seeing many doctors without a relief for this particular problem. I'll show you the imaging studies for the patient. Okay, so that's the X-ray, the axillary and the scapula Y. Anything significant there? Nurse? Is there anything abnormal?
So,
Anyone? No, they are all normal X-rays. Okay, I'll go to the MRI. Again, there is a series of films here. Do you see something? I'll browse through all the images for you first. Do you see something?
Bursate.
Is that a bursa or something else? It's not very uncommon. It's not very
cyst.
uncommon. Huh? Yeah, it's a cyst. Where?
Spine of the scapula.
Where do commonly cysts occur inside the shoulder joint? Two common places. This I would say is the commonest. Or parallel, but this is the commonest symptomatic cyst. This is I'll give you a clue. It's a nerve inflammation. Why this cyst? A compression of a nerve which caused the finding.
Scapular notch.
Scapular notch. Okay, which notch?
In.
Suprascapular notch. Is it? That's what you meant?
Yes, sir.
What happens? Yeah. So that brings the question: what happens when the suprascapular nerve is compressed?
Hello.
The suprascapular nerve supplies the supraspinatus and infraspinatus.
Yeah.
So why is the infraspinatus alone weak here? There is another notch below the suprascapular notch. called the spinoglenoid notch.
Hmm.
Yes, agree with me?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Spinoglenoid notch ganglion. So the nerve to the infraspinatus branches off from the suprascapular nerve after it passes through the suprascapular notch. So the supraspinatus is weak, but the infraspinatus is isolatedly weak. Supraspinatus is strong, but in ISP, infraspinatus is weak in this case. So I'll go through the MRI images once again. You can see that there's a huge cyst there, and this can be diagnosed only on if a MRI is done. And how would you treat this? What is the reason for this? This usually comes from a posterior labral tear, and the tear causes the fluid to seep out, and due to a flap valve mechanism, the fluid does not come back in. So the flap valve with the superior labrum is the reason. So this can happen as a consequence of a superior labral tear or a posterior superior labral tear as well, or a slap tear can lead on to something like this. So you have to, the treatment is an arthroscopic decompression there, that you are viewing from the anterior superior portal, and that is the posterior aspect where the cyst is being decompressed. You can see this. The fat globules or the globules from inside the cyst coming out, and the labrum is inside, so that the cyst does not happen again. And the patient is almost immediately happy. So this was the sign you were talking about. What is this finding? You can ask me questions if there is any doubt, or if I am wrong somewhere. So what is the finding here in the X-ray? That is a sorsal sign. It was commented earlier, I think. Yeah. So that is a sorsal. So sorsal means an eyebrow in French. Okay. So it's a white eyebrow above the humeral head or undersurface of the acromion, which is a sign of rotator cuff dysfunction. So the space is maintained, but since the supraspinatus is not functioning well, it says that the supraspinatus is impinging under the acromion, and it is usually associated with the acromioclavicular joint arthritis as well. So then pain kind of is there in the AC joint. So coming to acromioclavicular joint dislocations. What is the name of the classification?
Rockwood cluster.
Good. And what type is this? How many types are there?
6 types.
Yes, very good. What is this particular type?
5th type, superior translational.
So if I show you all the pictures, you will probably change it. Okay. Superior means the displacement should be much more. This is hardly away from the upper surface of the acromion. So you wouldn't call it a 5.
No,
This is just a
2.
3.
3. Yes. More than 50%. It has crossed more than 50%. I would call it a 3. I'll show you the pictures. I took it from this picture. All right. So 2 is where it is less than 50% of the dimension of the acromion which is crossed by the clavicle, and that is 3. 4 is posterior. 5 is what you said. So where it is completely displaced up, and 6 is something very rare. It's probably of only theoretical importance. I have not seen any, and seldom seen. So that's in a type 3, or maybe you can call it a type 5 as well. It's a type 5, sorry, it's not type 3, it's type 5. And that is the treatment we do nowadays. The arthroscopic surgeons use a dog bone button to reconstruct the acromioclavicular joint. This reconstruction alone is enough if it is an acute AC joint dislocation. So what is an acute, what is chronic? Okay, I've written it down. More than 3 weeks. More than 3 weeks we call it a chronic dislocation, or a subacute we call it. More than 3 weeks you have augmented with something more like a hamstring tendon. So acute you can reconstruct with dog bone and the fiber tapes connecting it. There will be 4 strands of fiber tape which goes through the clavicle and into the acromion. There is a jig which helps in drilling the hole, and you tie on the top, and the same tape can be used to fix the AC joint as well. The CC and AC both can be reconstructed, and if it's a chronic or a subacute one, you can pass a hamstring graft over the clavicle and under the coracoid, which will make the repair even stronger. I will show you a picture of something which we used to do earlier. Even now, this is the open method of AC joint reconstruction. What is the name of the procedure? The coracoacromial ligament is detached, and to the excised lateral end of the clavicle, the ligament is, and it can be augmented with a hamstring graft as well. What is this procedure called? Has anyone seen this? It's called a Weaver-Dunn procedure or a Weaver-Dunn technique. Huh? Okay. I'm sure some of you would have seen it. It's still being done, but surgeons have a propensity to go for arthroscopic nowadays. Fine. Or you can use the hook plate. All right. Another MRI. What is that? That is an axial view. And is that an abnormal or normal structure?
Abnormal.
Okay. What is it?
Anterior inferior glenoid lab.
Anterior inferior glenoid labrum. Okay. So this is where the humeral head is quite wide. Okay. When the humeral head is wide, this would be somewhere in the middle of the glenoid. So it's not inferior. I wouldn't call it inferior. So if it is not inferior, if it is middle or slightly superior, then what could it be? You're telling it's a labral tear, isn't it? It is not a labral tear, it's something else. Anyone? Gold medal question. Anyone? I'll give you it's a congenital variant. This is a thickened ligament. What is it called? Readers, yes. It's a Buford complex. Okay, so in a Buford complex, there will be absence of the glenoid labrum in this area, that is in the area above the equator, and the MGHL will be thickened in this case. This is the thickened middle glenohumeral ligament. So if you see an abnormally thickened glenohumeral ligament, especially in the superior cuts of the glenoid, think about a Buford complex. It's not very uncommon. It's around 5% of individuals, or maybe slightly more. So what will be your other DDs be? It could be a sublabral foramen or a superior labral tear also, which can present with an extension downwards. Okay, it's a type 9 slab tear. The slab tear terminology again has been extended to 9-10. That's where it extends downwards to the anterior inferior. So sublabral foramen, that's a sublabral foramen, or a sublabral sulcus could be there, or a recess should be there. And that's a Buford complex. Buford complex is a congenital absence of the anterior superior labrum, glenoid labrum. So that is from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, it might be absent. So that labrum is not important. When you go for a Bankart procedure, it is from 3 o'clock to 6 or 6:30 or 7, which is more important. So even if the labrum is not there at this point, don't worry about it. The biceps will take care. The biceps in the front and the subscapularis will take care of the anterior stability in the anterior superior part. So that is a common finding you see on an MRI. This could raise a suspicion of a slab tear. So here it is having a sharp endpoint and it is going towards the undersurface. So that is a sublabral sulcus or a sublabral recess. And this is a slab tear, superior labral anterior posterior tear, where the tear extends more into the substance of the labrum and the biceps. If it's going to the biceps 3 or 2, type 2 slab is the commonest superior labral tear we see. Again, another MRI. Diagnosis. What is that? That is a glenoid, the humeral head. And what is this structure?
Subscapularis, sir.
Subscapularis. Is it normal, abnormal? You're right. Is it normal or abnormal?
Sir, it's abnormal, sir.
Something is wrong, right? So actually, it is a normal subscapularis. It is a positional problem with MRI. Okay, the same patient, when you externally rotate, this is taken in internal rotation, excessive internal rotation of the shoulder. So when the shoulder is externally rotated, it becomes like what it normally should be. So that is something you should have in mind. It's not an abnormal finding. What is that? Spotter? The superior most cut of the axial shoulder MRI, and that's the acromioclavicular joint. That's the acromion. There is a line here. Is that a fracture?
No. Sacromial.
Osacromial. Very good. Very good. That's osacromial. That's again a congenital variant. What are these?
Hill-Sachs lesion, sir.
Hill-Sachs lesion. Yes. Which one is Hill-Sachs, or both?
Sir, on the
Obviously, the one on the right should be Hill-Sachs. There's a deep.
A, sir.
Yes.
B.
B is the Hill-Sachs. So A is a normal groove. It can be a normal groove sometimes seen, which you may think is the Hill-Sachs lesion. You should carefully look for cartilage or soft tissues here. So when you see a depression beyond the line of the humeral head or in the posterior superior aspect, this is a much inferior cut. In the posterior superior aspect, you think about a Hill-Sachs lesion. Do you see anything abnormal in this MRI?
Scapularis tear, sir.
Good, very good. Subscapularis torn. And can you see the biceps?
Lateral migration.
Yeah, you're right. Very good. So the biceps has come here. That is the biceps tendon. So when you see this vein-like structure here, always think about a subscapularis tear. Even if you see the structure here, this can mistake you for a normal subscapularis. But normally the subscap should be attached here. This is the lesser tuberosity. And as the bicipital groove finishes, that is where the subscap should normally attach. And you can see this is the subscapularis. And that is just the inferior fibers of the subscapularis. So I'll browse through the MRI images here. You can see the biceps is displaced much anteriorly. The bicipital groove is vacant, and the coronal image says it is a massive cuff tear. The supraspinal is normal and retracted medially. Was there a question? Okay. So that is the supraspinatus, which is again torn and retracted medially. So how do you like to treat this? Or do you want to, or do you want to do some more assessments before you decide on the treatment? Yes, Dr. Akhil? You there? Like call some names. Augustine George.
Sir, we'll go for a arthroscopic rotator cuff repair.
Okay, but before you do a repair in this type of scenario, you have to assess. That's what I wanted from you. You have to assess the quality of the muscle. Okay.
Percentage of retraction.
Yes, the retraction.
So gout layer fat grading.
Very good. Fatty infiltration is one thing you have to. Very good. And
The
what is the study
percentage.
you were talking about? Fatty infiltration. What are the stages of fatty infiltration? What is the staging system called?
Gout layer.
Gautley's. Okay. So when the retraction is beyond the mid humeral point, be wary. You may not be able to bring it forwards. So take the history properly. If it is a long-term problem, if it's a short-term problem within 3 months, you normally should be able to bring it forwards. So what other view would you like to have the Gautlier classification? Can you do the Gautlier classification in these two views? You need a sagittal image. Okay, a sag image of the scapula is required to do the Gautlier classification or the Gautlier staging. Here the muscle appears to be good in this view. There, that is a sublux biceps tendon and a subscapularis tear. So those are the stages of. There is a classification for subscapularis tear. Can you name it? The classification for subscapularis tears. It's Lafosse. Lafosse classification is there now. So when the SGHL or the biceps pulley is broken, the biceps dislocates into the subscapularis. So whenever you see the biceps is not there in the groove, suspect a subscapularis tear, even if the subscapularis is not clearly visualized. That's a Lafosse classification. These are the types of subscapularis tears. It usually starts from the superior aspect, and upper 1/3 is more important than the lower 2/3. Okay, so upper 1/3 is tendinous. So if it's a tear in the superior aspect, the power will be less, and that should be addressed, especially if the shoulder is dislocating. There is a history of dislocation. The rotator interval will be very weak. So attachment of the superior part of the subscapularis is more important than the inferior part of the subscapularis. So that is a subscapularis tendon being pulled onto its footprint. That is the tear. The humeral head is on the left side, and bites being taken, and that is after the repair. The one on the lower part, the humeral head and the subscapularis repaired onto it. Okay, it is torn off from there. Fine. A diagnosis. 47-year-old man, progressive pain in the left shoulder joint, osteolysis of the humerus, left scapula and clavicle were detected over the past 6 years. That's a difficult one, I know. I never knew this. I just put it up just for displaying the name. There is muscle atrophy all around the shoulder girdle. The person feels that the shoulder is becoming weaker and smaller. Anyone? There is no evidence of secondary hyperparathyroidism or renal osteodystrophy. So the body is not trying to compensate for the osteolysis. So it is focal, not generalized. That is what it means by no secondary hyperparathyroidism. Biopsy showed proliferation of atypical vessels with numerous osteoclasts and resorption lacunae. So that's
Vanishing bone syndrome.
Oh, okay, okay. And there is a name to that. It's a Gorham-Stout disease. Okay, just for MCQ sake. I've never seen one in my life. It's a spontaneous progressive bone destruction with vascular or lymphatic angiomatosis. So be careful in resections. So it can be vascular. Abnormal proliferation of capillaries will be there. So we were talking about the classification of fatty infiltration. So that is the Gautelier classification. It is a French classification name, and there are 5 grades of fatty infiltration of mainly the supraspinatus. So there the muscle is more than fat. Here the fat is increasing. There grade 2 is where 50% there is fatty atrophy. More than 50% fatty atrophy will be grade 4. More than 50% is fat. That's grade 4, and grade 5 is mostly fat load. Yes. Was there a comment or a question? Yeah, that's what is the other sign for fatty atrophy? The tangent sign. So you draw a line from the upper aspect of the spine to the upper aspect of the body of the scapula, and if the supraspinatus is below that line, you say it is tangent sign positive. So if the tangent sign is positive and is more than grade 2, then you be careful about rotator cuff repairs, because the results of rotator cuff repair may not be as good in an old rotator cuff tear. So when you're talking about fat infiltration, you have to think about the Hamada and Fukuda. It's commonly called the Hamada classification for supraspinatus, and this progresses into a glenohumeral arthritis. So there will be a reduction of the space. There is stage 1, stage 2 where there is a reduction of the space, stage 3 where there is acetabularization of the acromion because of the rubbing of the humeral head, and that progressively leads to arthritis of the glenohumeral joint as well as the subacromial space, and stage 5 there is a humeral head collapse as well. Up to 4A you can think about reconstructing the superior capsular capsule. Stage 2, up to stage 2 the results of rotator cuff repair are good. Stage 3 and 4A you may be able to get results, but results are doubtful. 4B and 5 you have to think about other reconstructive methods, and that is a patient with subacromial as well as glenohumeral arthritis. MRI showed severe fatty atrophy and thinning even of the subscapularis, but subscapularis is relatively okay. Infraspinatus is also weak there. Supraspinatus is the tone and atrophy. So how would you treat this? Yes?
Reverse shoulder arthroplasty.
Yeah, that is an indication for a reverse shoulder. That was what was done for the patient, and she has very good results, and she is waiting for a total shoulder on the other side, bilateral shoulder arthritis. So shall we go to some questions of what we saw, or recollect what we did? It's almost an hour now. What is the
Source
finding here on the
Source
X-ray?
and sign.
That's a sourcil sign. Good. And this indicates what?
Rotator cuff dysfunction.
Yes,
Chronic.
dysfunction. It's possibly not a rotator cuff tear. So when there is sclerosis underneath, you know that the rotator cuff is impinging. So what is the treatment for impingement? How do you treat a patient coming to you with a shoulder impingement?
Acromioplasty.
Impingement, you directly go for surgery. Don't give treatment for the patient. Okay, you evaluate, you rule out metabolic reasons, and when you see that the rotator cuff is functional, would you directly send the patient for an MRI, or would you try to treat the patient otherwise? If you see that the subacromial space is more than 5 millimeters, more than 4 to 7 is considered normal. If it is there, then you can give a trial of conservative shoulder rehabilitation. Alright, you try to strengthen the supraspinatus. So how does impingement happen? What pulls the humeral head towards the acromion?
Deltoid.
Deltoid.
Very good, yes, it's the deltoid. So the deltoid's pull has to be neutralized by the supraspinatus. If it is not happening, an impingement happens. So that should be there in your mind. That concept should always be there. So if there is an impingement, you know that the deltoid is stronger than the supraspinatus. That's it. Okay. So the strength difference or the imbalance is the reason for the impingement. So you have to correct the strength of the supraspinatus. So if you are able to rehabilitate or strengthen the supraspinatus, then the impingement can be reduced. So if you see a good subacromial space, and if when you test the rotator cuff and you get a 5/5 or a 4+ or a 4 power in the supraspinatus, and the other muscles are grade 5, then you can always give a trial of physio. I always give a trial of at least 3 weeks of physiotherapy to strengthen the supraspinatus. And if the pain, I always tell the patients, if there is a reduction of pain and symptoms by at least 50%, then it means in 3 weeks time, that means that the physiotherapy will work on you. If it's not working, I tell the patient, what is the next investigation you can suggest?
MRI.
Would you directly send the patient to MRI, or is there something cheaper and faster and economical for the patient?
Ultrasound.
Yes, the new age ultrasounds are all actually good and almost at par, we can say, with the MRI, especially if you have an ultrasound machine in the OPD. Most of the shoulder surgeons have ultrasound machines, and I bring one especially for shoulder injections. So you can see these muscles. So PGs, I would say, if you have a good radiology department, or the colleagues are good, or you have a portable ultrasound machine which is of good quality, bring it over to the OPD and learn how the muscles work when the shoulder moves. You can learn it on one another. It just requires some jelly, and you can keep the probe and learn. It is very useful, especially when you do injections of the shoulder joint. So instead of putting it blindly, you can go directly and see the muscles and instill it into the place you want, like the glenohumeral region or subacromial, where you really want to go. So ultrasound can tell us about rotator cuff tears, especially completely toes. But partial tears can be missed. Biceps pathology can be missed. So for all that, you have to go for a MRI scan, preferably 1.5 or 3T MRI. All right. So shall we go to the next? What test is that?
Speed test.
Erguson.
Yeah. That is the arrow. That's why I put the arrow here. The external rotation. So our supination of the elbow at 60 to 90 degrees. So a person comes to you 40 years of age with biceps tendinitis and shoulder impingement. You have tenderness over the bicipital groove. You have put the patient through physio. 1 month of physio, patient is still not happy. What would you suggest next? Acromioplasty or something else? What is the next step? Physio has failed. What next? Dr. Dennis.
Local steroids.
Local injections, yes. Right. And that's why I said injection has to be given if possible after an ultrasound screening, or if possible after an MRI. So you have to rule out a rotator cuff tear before you put in the steroid. If you are putting it blindly, you are instilling it blindly. If it goes into a torn rotator cuff, the steroid can weaken the rotator cuff further, and it can produce a complete tear, a partially torn one. I've had many episodes of patients coming in after injections, even by neurologists or orthopedic surgeons or Ayurveda doctors giving injections, and the partially torn tendon completely rupturing. So if you are instilling steroid, it can be done into the bicipital groove, yes. Under ultrasound guidance is much more safer, or into the glenohumeral joint, which again is a safe area. Avoid lignocaine, or that can be chondrotoxic. So with some saline, you mix the triamcinolone or whichever steroid you like, and put it preferably into the glenohumeral joint and into the bicipital groove, or carefully into the subacromial bursa as well, but never into the tendon of the supraspinatus, which can tear if you are not ruling out a rotator cuff tear. If it's a good tendon, a 40-year-old with bicipital tendinitis and supraspinatus tendinitis, it can work well. It can work magic sometimes. The patient can be very happy with you. In a week's time, the patient can come happily with you. But then don't stop with that. You have to strengthen the supraspinatus as well, because the reason is still there. It is the pain you have relieved. You have to strengthen the supraspinatus, counsel the patient well, send the patient to the physio. You have to give them TheraBand exercises or weights or whatever, TheraTubes or whatever you give for strengthening the shoulder, which has to be done meticulously before the patient returns back to whatever sport caused the supraspinatus tear or the biceps tendinitis. The same patient coming to you after 3 months, you gave the injection, and the patient was very happy, came and touched your feet and said, "Doctor, you are my God, shoulder pain is gone, I am going to go back to my sport." And 2 months later, the patient comes back again, "Doctor, the pain has come back." What do you do now? Probably the patient did not rehab the shoulder well. Probably the patient went back to sport earlier than required. So how do you manage that now? You take an MRI, and the MRI shows that the biceps is inflamed, or there is fluid in the bicipital groove more than normal. Now you have to think about what you said, the subacromial decompressions, or you have to address biceps is the most painful structure inside the shoulder joint. Okay, earlier we used to do a lot of subacromial decompressions. So acromioplasty as such is not 100% done nowadays. Okay, so always have it in your mind that acromioplasty is not an answer for shoulder impingement. All right, that was the answer before the understanding of the shoulder biomechanics of the balance between the deltoid and the supraspinatus. Okay, so the impingement is due to the pull of the deltoid, and even if you cut off the acromion, if it's a type 2 acromion or a type 3 acromion, even if you shave off the unders of the acromion, again the deltoid will still pull the humeral head up and cause a impingement there if the supraspinatus is weak. Okay, so always have it in your mind, you have to strengthen the supraspinatus. For strengthening the supraspinatus, you might require to address the painful structure. So you are going in with an arthroscope. What is the commonest viewing portal for the shoulder? Can I ask Dr. Mohammed Faiz? Are you there? Sleeping? Come on. Unmute yourself, Dr. Faiz. Okay, so you go in. What is the viewing portal? Anyone?
Posterior.
Posterior, very good. And for the subacromial region, which is the working portal, which are the working portals? The lateral as well as anterior. Okay, for instability surgeries, you have two anterior portals, that is anterior superior, anterior inferior. For the subacromial space, you use one anterior portal, or you can use a more laterally placed anterior portal, which is called the Elman anterior portal or anterolateral portal, Elman portal. Okay, so that with that you are coming in, and you see that the biceps tendon is inflamed and partially torn. What do you do then? You do an acromioplasty, you do a smoothening, type 2 or type 3 acromion is shaved, the subacromial bursa is excised, you see that the supraspinatus is inflamed but not torn, and you see that the biceps is partially torn. So what do you do then? How can you address the biceps problem? The patient is 40 years old. or I would say 45. Biceps tenotomy. Okay, you can either do a biceps tenotomy or a tenodesis. All right. So biceps tenodesis is done in younger people, and tenotomy, biceps tendon, the long head of the biceps is mainly for stability of the shoulder joint, not for power. So the power of the shoulder joint is almost at par even if you do a tenodesis or a tenotomy. The tenodesis helps, one, for cosmesis. Second, it gives some stability in overhead movements. The main power of the biceps is by the short head. The long head is the main stabilizer in overhead activities. Okay, so the biceps can be tenodised usually in younger people. The same pathology you deal with in an older patient like 50, 55 or 60, above 60, you do a tenotomy and the patient may not know even. And there are people with the Popeye sign with good shoulder function. All right, that's the Yergassen. Answer for this?
C and D.
Yes, Dr. Agil. C and D are the wrong statements. Yes, good. That's the what's the diagnosis there? Dr. Dennis?
Rufords.
The Buford complex, yes. That's a Buford complex. All right, I'll show you one more case scenario. A 16-year-old male with pain over the right shoulder, 3 months duration. He's a volleyball player, but now he's finding it difficult to throw the ball. On examination, there is internal rotation deficit. There is a stiffness internal rotation of around 35 degrees, which is quite significant. The muscle strengths when tested are all 5/5. The instability tests. What are the instability tests? Dr. Shyam? What are the tests for anti? What are the tests for anterior instability? Apprehension?
Relocation.
Yeah? Apprehension
Release
test?
test. Release.
What is that? Pardon?
We do, press and release.
Yeah, the load and shift test. That's what you meant, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, the load and shift is there. It's not commonly done nowadays. You can do the Jobs relocation test. The patient lying down and the surgeon giving a posterior pressure, and the same apprehension type movement, able movement is done. And when the surgeon releases the apprehension comes, and when you push it backwards, there is a Jobs relocation test. And you have to always test for the biceps anchor. How do you test for the biceps anchor? Or how do you test for the superior labrum? What is the test for the superior labrum?
Right.
Let me find some more names. Anupam, how do you test for the superior labrum where the biceps attaches? What test is positive? Superior labral tear, slap tear. What is the test for
O'Brien
slap
test,
tear?
sir. O'Brien test.
Yeah, you need the name slap tear. Okay, I purposely didn't use that term. Okay, superior labral tear. Okay, it's a slap tear. So always test for the superior labrum also when you test the instability. What are the X-rays you would advise for instability? True APS.
Best.
Hmm? Axillary. Then
Striker notch.
yeah, striker notch view for the Hill-Sachs lesion. Very good. And axillary view can be modified. It can be a Bernagio view. Okay, so if you are allowed to take only 3 X-rays, I would suggest the true AP view, the Bernagio view. Bernagio view is taken with the hand kept like that or kept over the bucky and shot like that. From the back, the X-ray beam comes and the screen or the receiver is kept in the front. All right. So Bernagio gives you with a 30-degree caudate tilt. So Bernagio gives a view of the anterior-inferior glenoid. Okay, or earlier we used to do the West point view. So almost similar, but the patient lying down in a different position. The West point view with the hand kept like that, forward view. There's a West point view. Bernagio is with the hand kept forwards, the patient standing, and that's for the glenoid, and the striker notch is for the lesion. Important X-ray views. For rotator cuff pathology, what are the 3 X-rays you would suggest? If you are suspecting a rotator cuff pathology, 3 common X-rays you would suggest are the true APS, axillary, and what is the view you would advise for looking at the acromion?
Scapular Y view.
Scapular view, yes, or you could call it the outlet view. You just need to see the outlet, the superior aspect. The superior aspect of the scapular view is called the outlet view. So for rotator cuff, an older patient, probably you can do a outlet view also. It's the same view, only upper part. Scapular Y and outlet are exactly the same. Only the inferior part of the scapula is seen in a Y view. Okay. So let's go forwards. That is the MRI of the patient. What is your diagnosis? So let's go back to the patient again. I'll show you the previous slide. Sorry. 16-year-old male, volleyball player, 3 months pain, cuff swelling. There's a positive finding there, and 1.7 to 1.9 area lesion on the glenoid, the central and posterior margins of the glenoid. I'll give you some choices. What's your diagnosis? Is it a loose body? Is it osteochondritis dissecans? Is it a Nora lesion? Is it osteochondroma or enchondroma?
Osteochondroma.
Okay. Is there any difference of opinion? You want to see the images again? That is the X-ray. What is osteochondroma? Is that an osteochondroma or something else? Osteochondroma should be a growth outside the outline of the glenoid. This is within the margins of the glenoid. You can see that the cartilage is abnormal here. I gave a clue again. The anterior part, the cartilage is good. Here, the cartilage is abnormal. Any other diagnosis? Anyone wants to give a shot? Afzal? Dr. Afzal Rashid? It was an osteochondritis dissecans of the shoulder joint. It can happen in the shoulder joint as well. Okay, see that once again. There, there's an osteochondritis lesion, and this is an area of reduced vascularity, and the bone piece is probably coming off. How would you treat it? seen it in the knee joint, isn't it? Commonly in the medial femoral condyle, in the weight bearing area, you would have encountered osteochondritis dissecans. In the shoulder joint, how would you treat it? Would you conserve the treatment or reattach? In the knee joint, if it is loose, you can even reattach it or with screws or anchors. Here, the shoulder joint is again, we said, is a very forgiving joint, and that is a lesion after 3 months of conservative treatment. Okay, the cartilage has grown back and the osteocartilaginous depression has filled up. In a younger child, the conservative treatment works well. So, 9:20. I suppose.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful
Thank you,
session.
sir.
Night. Good night.